Hey guys, Jamie Ray with Jamie Ray Vintage. Today's DIY is how to upholster a vintage couch. These are my favorite couches to upholster because they have wooden frames, which makes it easy to staple into, and they don't have any rolled arms. So it's a fairly straightforward process. I'm going to give you a few tips and hints on how to do it. And you'll notice that there are no cushions on my couch. We're not going to be talking about sewing cushions. I don't like to sew. I have a seamstress and I drop my fabric off and pay her to do it. So you can either sew them yourself or find somebody else who's great with a sewing machine. So the first step you got to do is get this old fabric. Somebody tried to paint this so you can see that it's blue or whatever, but I'm just going to rip it all off and use my pliers. First you have to get off the piping, and then you get underneath to the fabric underneath. Sometimes it's kind of hard. I'm going to try to leave the batting in place so that way I can reuse it. If it's not reusable, then I'll buy new batting at the store. And usually when I get about this far, it's when I have Zeb come and he rips the whole thing apart for me. Once you take the fabric off, you want to remove any loose staples. So we're going to go ahead and get to adding the fabric. Once we pulled all the fabric off of this, we noticed that the back was just powder. The foam had disintegrated completely. So Zeb has some footage. You can see him cutting the foam. We put on here foam. We just got it at Home Depot. We cut it to fit, and then we're wrapping it with batting that I bought at the craft store. You can also buy foam at the craft store, but the foam at Home Depot is significantly less expensive and it works pretty well. So once we wrap this with batting, then we're ready to add our fabric. So now we're going to be adding our fabric. We had to move inside because it started raining, which was raining on our parade here. So we're going to get started right in the middle, and I'm going to use my air compressed staple gun. If you don't have an air compressed staple gun, go ahead and use your handheld. And I'm going to staple just along the wood line where it was originally stapled the first time. And I'm just going to come across here and pull nice and taut. So the next step, we're just going to be pushing this fabric underneath and pulling it to the other side. So I pulled my fabric through the bottom, and I'm going to go ahead and pull this as taut as I can, and then staple. About every inch is how far you want your staples to be. Now that the top and bottom are done, we're just going to shove these sides through. This is where, if you haven't gotten all the staples out, you will definitely feel it. Right down here, there's a bar that connects the couch. So what you have to do is you have to make a snip so you can get around that bar. So I pull the fabric out, and the bar is right about there. I'm going to cut to about 2 inches from the bar. Then I'm going to push the fabric through, and we'll come around to the other side. Here's the part where I've snipped. I'm going to gently pull and make sure it's as close as possible. Kind of tearing a little as I go, but just go ever so slowly so you don't over tear. Once you know you've got it all the way, then you're going to go ahead and staple the sides. So it's usually good if you've got somebody with you to have them go around the front and make sure that you don't have any puckers. And you might also need to, right here where the corner is, make a little snip. That way your fabric will come the way that you want it to. So I'm just checking the front, making sure we don't have any wrinkles, and I'm gonna go ahead and staple. I'm gonna go ahead and do the exact same process on this other side, and then we'll get started on the bottom of our couch. The next step is we're gonna be doing the bottom. The bottom is much like the top. We're gonna lay it out. We're gonna find our corners. So there's a corner here, and I'm gonna snip in this corner. That way it could go around the bar. And then I'm gonna push it underneath. And I'm going to do the same thing on the other side. That way it can get around the bar. And I'm going to push this underneath. Now I'm going to snip it at this corner to get around this bar. Now I'm going to pull my fabric around all the corners and get it nice and tight. Now that my fabric is all smooth, I'm going to go ahead and staple on the front. I always like to start in the middle and work my way across. I'm just feeling where the line is for the wood trim. You want to come right up next to that. I'm going to come almost all the way to the end, and then I'm going to stop. I'll get the corners once I get to that part. I had a few staples that didn't go in, so I'll staple right next to them, and I'll come back and pull this out. Once you get to the corner, you're going to pull this edge piece back around to the side and staple it taut. Then you're going to come back around on this side and go all the way over to the corner. Then you're going to take this leftover piece here and you're going to fold it flat and add 2 pleats. One over here, and pull it around and do one over here. Then come across and staple. You're going to do the same thing on the other side. Once you're finished with that, then you'll go around to the back of the couch and do the back. Okay, so once you come around to the back, you're going to take your fabric and pull it taut and staple. I start in the middle and then I work my way across. And I didn't show it, but I did make a slit here where this wood piece is, and a slit over here where this wood piece is. That way my fabric could get around these braces. I'm going to go ahead and staple this all the way across, and then we'll get over to our other sides. Over and do each side on the bottom. You're going to pull it super taut and staple across. So on the arms we've added extra batting because the batting we had to remove. And then I've cut a piece of fabric just a little bit bigger than my arm here. And then I made 2 snips, one snip here and one snip down at the bottom, and pulled my fabric through like I've done in all the other places. And now I'm ready to staple. So I'm going to go ahead and start at the top, and I'm going to work my way around this way, and then we'll do the stapling on the back. You could do this in 2 separate pieces. Here, do a piece here and then a piece across this way, but I chose to do it in one, and you'll see why in a minute. And then I'm also going to have to cut this excess fabric so we can wrap the arm. So I'm going to cut this excess fabric off here, come down this far, then I'm going to take, oops, I'm going to cut a little bit further. I'll have to trim this up a little bit more later, but I'm coming all the way down to this here, and then I'm going to take my fabric and I'm going to come around the arm like this, I'm going to tuck this part in. Don't have any raw edges. And then I'm going to come and I'm actually just going to staple along here, because when we put this piece on, the other piece will come up here and cover that. So I'm going to staple around this part of the arm. Now I'm going to come around this part of the chair and staple around here. So I'm going to snip the fabric right here and tuck that under. And then I'll come around this side and staple it in. So now I'm going to take this fabric and staple down. I'm going to do the same thing on the other side, and then we'll be ready to put on our arms.
Alright, time for the tufting. I left this old fabric that held the springs in place and kept them padded. We left that in there, and it's got the marks where the old tufts were, so I don't have to remark it out. So what I'm going to do, I just have this dowel here. It's kind of pointed, and I'm going to run it into these holes, and I'll show you what it looks like on the front too. I pushed it through the foam, and then now I can feel where my brad goes, for my tuft, and I'll show you on the front here. This is where I push through my foam right here. I'm just going to take the brad, it's pointed, put it right on the tip of that dowel, and follow it back through the foam. And open it up. Okay, so here's what it looks like on the back end. Now that I've pushed it through the foam, you push pretty hard on the front with your hand on the front of that brad, and you open this up.
Put on here. I am doing coffee sack on the side of these, but I have to put this drop cloth underneath it so that way you don't see the cotton. But if you weren't going to do the coffee sack, you would just do the drop cloth and then be done. So I'm just stapling this on the top here along the edge, and then I'll come down and staple this corner here. And then I'm going to cut off this fabric so that way I can get a nice straight line across here and make it a little easier, so I don't have so much excess. Then I'm just going to follow this around and staple along the bottom, and then along this way, and pull it around the back. So we've got our drop cloth underneath to line it, and we're going to start with our coffee sack. I think I paid like 50 cents for these, and they've been hanging around my garage for maybe a year, so I'm excited to use them. A couple things about coffee sacks, they're kind of scratchy, so if you use them for upholstery, you're going to want to use them on a part of the couch where people aren't rubbing up against or sitting against, because it's not super comfortable. The second thing is sometimes they smell like whatever's been in them, beans, coffee, cocoa beans, whatever has been in them. So I took this and I threw it in the dryer with some fabric softener, and it smells so much better, and it's actually even a little softer. So that's a little tip for you if you use these sacks. So I'm going to go ahead and just staple along here just the way that I put this other piece on, and then when I get to the section where this piece meets up with this other piece that I had up front, I'm just gonna fold this under neatly so that way you don't see the seam, and I will show you a close-up of it when I'm done. Once you get the top done, then you're gonna go ahead and come across the bottom, and then you do the side. So right here, I took the coffee sack and I folded it under and stapled it here and here, so that way I've got a nice clean seam and you won't see any rough edges. We're getting really close to finished here. We're gonna put this back on. I'm gonna start in the middle and I'm gonna use my staple gun and then put a staple about every inch, and I'm gonna go over the top and down on the sides, and then I'll show you how we finish underneath. So we stapled across the top, and I said it was gonna go down the sides, but I actually didn't. I just stapled across the top. Now I'm gonna do the bottom. I'm gonna pull it as taut as possible and then do the sides to get out the rest of the wrinkles. So you're gonna wanna, whatever fabric you use, you wanna pull it so that way there's no creases in there. You're gonna start in the middle and work your way across the side. So we've got our top done, our bottom done, and now we're gonna work on our sides. When I'm all finished, this will have trim down the side so it'll cover my staples. So I'm just gonna pull this taut and just staple it down the side. I'm gonna do the same thing on the other side, and I'll trim off all this excess fabric and we'll be ready to get our trim on. So the final step is gonna be to hot glue our trim on. You're gonna wanna use a high temp hot glue. You need it to stick really well. And you're gonna put a good amount of glue on there because you don't want this to come off. After I get it on, sometimes I add a little bit more if it's not enough. And you're gonna go everywhere that you have a raw edge or staples, you're going to cover it up with trim. So I'm gonna go ahead and glue this onto this entire couch, and we'll show you the finished project when we're all done. Alright guys, we've got our finished couch here. It was a little bit of work, but not too hard. I think if I had to sew the cushions, it would have been even worse. But we've got our trim on here, and it's ready to go to its new home. Be sure to give us a thumbs up and subscribe to Jamie Ray Vintage. Also, check out the link below for my other no-sew upholstery tutorials.